Hey, yeah, sorry, I lost you for a second. So as I was talking about enterprises, when you're gunning for enterprise clients, there is a different set of expectations that comes in terms of product development, technical expertise, and operational security. Because you're going for the bigger, when you're moving up market, these are things to keep in mind, and these are things that you will want to look at bettering. And our guests today have some great experience in it. Harikrishnan Karunanidhi is the CTO of Hackerrank, a tech company that has yeah. So as someone who's helped, Hari has someone who's helped tech giants like Peloton, Bloomberg, and VMware, and Goldman Sachs, and more companies to scale and like build great tech teams. And he's someone who's helped and scale HackerRank to a Series D company with more than 1,500 plus employees. So that's a fantastic task, and he knows how to do it. So welcoming Hari for the session. And we have Girish, the CEO of Sprinto, compliance automation platform that's helping companies like WebEngage, Neon, Anaconda, and more with their infosec compliances. Girish, you're the best person to ask when it comes to having this conversation, and I think you and Hari will have a fantastic session. So over to you guys.
Thanks, Arti. And
Thanks,
thanks
Arti.
for joining us, Hari. This is really exciting for me.
Of course, it's a pleasure to be here, Girish. Looking forward for an interesting conversation ahead.
All right. So, let's just dive right in. One of the
Mhm.
first things that I wanted to ask you is as an early stage startups, right? Most startups trying to do just the bare minimum, especially when they're on the race to their PMF. And, at HackerRank, I'm curious, when did you start thinking about security and compliance seriously? I'm just curious if there was like a specific trigger, or does this happen like gradually over a period of time?
It actually starts from day one, and I think security is not one of those things where you could just say, okay, starting today we are going to focus on it,
Hmm.
and before that we are going to ignore it, kind of a thing. It's certainly critical from day one. It's just that you sort of start to pick and choose the areas where you are building on security. So, for example, HackerRank is a developer platform where programmers write code and we execute the code on our system and tell you whether your code is optimal, whether it's correct, and every other aspects of your code.
Hmm.
So the first few code submissions we got was RMRF star. People try to see how can they can break into your systems, right? So there are parts of things where we couldn't really take any chances.
Hmm.
So we had to make sure the sandbox which runs the code is
Hmm.
absolutely secure. And,
Hmm.
and even within our employees, and we even had a contest where we had winners who could break into our system.
Hmm.
So that's the part where we were very, very clear about security. And there are parts where we couldn't focus at that point in time. For example, a lot of enterprise features like your SAML, your audit logs, and multiple other things we wanted to build got
Hmm.
deprioritized because this is probably, say, our fort on top of or inside which we could build anything we want. And if the code sandbox or the what we used to call it as code checker gets a breach, then we are going to have a ton of issues beyond that.
Hmm.
So that's maybe like day one from the engineer standpoint, and everyone else built that in a secure way. And we
Hmm.
also had we used the right tools. So we used some of the tools like basic AWS best practices, and
Hmm.
like and some things are done when you do it early stages. It's a lot easier. For example, setting up our VPC and other things within AWS. It's much harder to move these databases from one place to another place, right? So
Yeah.
that's it is bare minimum, but things which didn't give us a lot of pain later. And there are certain security features and things which you can prioritize later, say once you hit product market fit, or once you see some success points there.
Got it. Got it. Thanks for sharing that. This is really interesting to hear about how it happened in Hackerrank, and it seems like, given the specific nature of your product, you had to be down on security a lot earlier than perhaps some of the other startups would. So let me try and ask you a question in hindsight. Then,
Mm-hmm.
knowing what you know now, would you
Mm-hmm.
change anything about the point at which you focused on security? Or like, if you were to do it again, would you choose like a different point to do that?
Um, I think I wouldn't change, but I think I wouldn't have been that scared of security. Like there is always that
Mhm.
paranoid of what's gonna happen, and you're the minute you put your security hat, you have to be like constantly worried about what's gonna happen, who's gonna break in stuff. The other thing is understanding the processes. Like we think security is all about breaking into systems and trying to others from protecting your site or protecting your assets from others hacking into your stuff. But
Mhm.
uh, it's pretty much like following the processes, like set the right processes and following the processes.
Mhm.
And probably looking back, I might have taken it a little, I would say, more relaxed than what it was, because it was always in the paranoia state. And if you know that you are going to set the process, and
Mhm.
you set the process when you are at, when you are at a peaceful state, you are trying to figure out what's the right thing for your company for the next few years, and
Mhm.
ensure right checks and balances to follow that processes. And
Mhm.
this is pretty much the big pillar on top of which you can build a security process for a company. It feels like this is it. Like if you do this, you would be compliant with anything and everything, rather than just being paranoid about what's going to happen. Maybe would have done the same thing, but with more peace of mind.
Got it. Actually, that's a very interesting insight. I think what you're trying to say is that we often uh, tend to think of security like combat, where there's like an
Hmm.
attacker and a defender, and while it's
Yeah.
it's actually more about discipline of just doing basic important things, over and over again, and that's actually what
Hmm.
gives you more security than sort of imagining like this rush of blood combat scene where you're trying to avoid like an active attack. Did I understand that right?
Yes, it feels like and more than a combat war. Like you don't know from where the threat is going to come in, and
Yeah.
and you are constantly looking around. Or if you played these video games, two shooter games where you could get a hit from anywhere, versus this is a pretty much clear follow the process kind of a thing, and that takes you a long way.
Got it. Thanks. Thanks. That makes a lot of sense. So, Hari, what I'd like to ask now is, especially from a perspective of, imagine yourself in the shoes of an early stage CTO, early
Hmm.
stage startup CTO. How would you approach, starting a security program in a startup that
Hmm.
has, as of yet, very little security measures or a security mind space in
Hmm.
place? What parts would you focus on? What battles would you pick, especially in a startup, early stage startup, where you have fewer resources at your hand?
Got it. Like I said, there are some pieces
Hmm.
which are hard to move later, and some
Hmm.
pieces which you can always change later. And being sort of truthful to yourself to make sure like which is needed and which is not needed. For example, I can give an example of audit logs. For it's one of the features which our customers wanted for quite some time, and we built an API and saying gave the API endpoint to our consumers, saying here is, thankfully, a lot of our users were developers and hiring managers and so on. So you could tell them saying here is the API endpoint to consume the audit logs, and you could just go ahead and you don't have to build the entire UI and your your standard table state features like downloading as an Excel filter and all the other things. We
Hmm.
provided audit logs, but not in how you would be used in other products.
Hmm.
So we were collecting audit logs all the way. So the first thing we did is just collect audit log and keep storing it, and then we will figure out what's the low hanging fruit way of delivering it back to customers. And now
Hmm.
we have a better, much better way where you can see the audit log directly from the UI. So this is from a product perspective, you can play around with things. From an infrastructure perspective, like it's much better to invest in some tools which takes care of your entire system. So for example, like we use this tool called Detectify, which crawls our website and gives us score on how we are performing in different on our web application, and just checks the basic sanity checks. We use Sprinto, which again checks everything within our infrastructure and tells us whether you're you want these tools which is going to tell you and it has a checklist loaded in, and it's going to tell you when things go wrong, you have some bandwidth, go fix it. And you can set the threshold there, and that's where security is the thing. You set the threshold. So you want to initially start with saying we are not going to have any high priority or critical issues, or anything comes up, we are going to fix it in say 1 month. And then once it becomes your habit, your culture, then you can say, okay, 1 month is now too long. Can we go to 20 days and can we prioritize more? So that is how we have evolved this. I don't know if this works for all, but this worked for us in the early stages where we didn't have a lot of bandwidth to fix everything, and you have to prioritize what. And having, I think, investing in those tools helped a lot. Like you just have the automation do the job for you when you especially don't have the time.
Got it. So if I have to summarize what you just said, Hari, for my understanding, you're saying that one of the important things to recognize is that security isn't like a Boolean that you are secure or not. It's kind of like a dial, and you could actually choose to where you want to be at the dial depending on the resources that you have at your hand at any stage of a startup. So you choose your battles carefully that way. And secondly, I think what you're trying to say is that you can lean on tools when you don't have the people to be able to spend on on security. So tools is what you would lean on more as you are in that stage. Did I understand that roughly?
Yes. And the even if you are like if even if you are, I'd say, bootstrapped or whatever size of funding you have, investing on these tools has a much better ROI than anything else. Like, because it saves a ton of time and automatically checking things for you and doing the job. You can do every hour checking or every day checking, and those things matter a lot, especially during early stages.
Got it. So that kind of leads me into my next question, which is about the in early stage startup, it is basically the CTO who is wrangling anything and everything that has to do with code. So my curious question is about who owns security as a startup is growing through its various stages. And as a CTO, how do you balance this with building product, which is one of your primary responsibilities? And do you think of this as a parallel stream? Do you think of this as you try and make this part of your development process? How do you just balance this with the other responsibilities that you have as a CTO?
Yeah, I think I don't know. I've seen this pattern as well, where it's the CTO who also owns the security process, even the early stage, and even at Hackerrank, like after 10+ years, still I own security process. I think the early days I was building and writing code with others, and the code review made me give different people how to write good code or how to write secure code. What are the security processes we are following? And I could also, I was filling all the compliance documents and other things which our customers were asking for. So because I knew both the worlds, so I could ensure that the title automatically came to me. I think it right now the one change which also helped made it easier for a CTO to handle this is, if it's hard to, not all teams will report to you. As long as you're the CISO, ensure at least the DevOps team is reporting to you. Like, that's where you need to influence the entire company with the security best practices and the right tools and so on. So even now the DevOps team directly reports to me, and that's how I still am able to make faster changes in terms of our security process and programs and so on. Over the period of time, for the software engineering teams, say data engineering teams, the machine learning teams, you can only set guidelines and ensure like you control it at a infra level, and eventually the guidelines, do code reviews every now and then to understand what's happening, work through the architects. Now we have architects through which we can influence the best practices. So security is one of the things where it's sort of like it's critical, but you don't want to build the secure product which nobody uses. Like it has that right balance between like, okay, these are the things we need to prioritize there, but we are not going to deprioritize security. It's right there. We have taken care of the basic things, and so that's how I have been dealing it so far.
Got it. That actually is very helpful. So, Hari, tell me, when new engineers were joining your team, did you do something to make sure that they get up to speed with your security practices? Because you have something in place now, and that the existing people are aware of it. But how do you sort of make sure that the new people who join become part of the same culture that you have with your existing team?
Yeah, there are good onboarding practices we follow. So one is we have one person who's an external contractor for us who would train our entire team, do a 1 hour session on data privacy, the different basic theoretical understanding of what are the different parts of security and how we do things here at Hackerrank. And then there is enough Confluence documents which is specifically on how we write secure code. There is an training module we use from Sprinto where they have to go through the entire deck, and we try to even customize the deck. For example, as you take the deck, some of the more components it talks about, the Confluence also has like how it can be hacked. For example, there is a specific URL I host on my website which looks just like the Okta page, and the document says if you give your Okta password here, Hari will publish in the company channel. So this is how people try to do phishing and so on. So there are fun ways in which we try to do things and try to educate them on day one. And beyond that process, it's the code reviews, which is people are writing code day in and day out, and enforcing even in GitHub, making sure there are checklists to make people don't use these functions, spending some time on the linters to automatically check for bad code practices, and ensuring the seniors and people who have been here, they tell the new folks in the right possible way. I think that is a never-ending process. Like you constantly learn and you learn new ways of doing things and start introducing that in the company.
Got it. So, Hari, just to change tracks a little bit, I want to talk a little bit about the external facing aspects of security. And like you passingly mentioned in one of your previous answers, is that, in the early stages, you were personally looking at a lot of the security reviews and questionnaires that larger companies tend to ask. So, my question is, can you give us some sense of what are the kind of features that enterprises tend to expect from a security standpoint? What were some of the common questions you would get when they were vetting you as a vendor, especially from a security standpoint?
Yeah, I've filled in these questionnaires, which has like 500,000 odd questions, and there is, and after you fill enough, you understand the common theme around it. Like initially, you tend to believe like, okay, these are all unique questions created for these companies and so on, and after enough experience, you get a sense of, okay, this is what they are looking at. These are the broad categories of like, okay. So overall, at a high level, they want to know how is their data protected by external people trying to say break in, or do you have practices around that? And they also want to make sure how that's actually sort of easy to some level. The second one is how do they want to protect their data uh, with respect to us. Like they want to make sure HackerRank doesn't misuse the data, and we use the data only for the right purposes and so on. So and the second one is tricky to give in terms of like you need to set up a lot better processes how do you develop software, how do you give access control within your internal team, and so on. So so some basic features like your audit logging, your SAML authentication, your how do you store passwords, and so if you there are enough frameworks around it, like CAIQ is one framework where if you answer that and go through all of that, then you're mostly covered. And the sections or categories, and that now they've even added the cloud security part as well. It's many a times what we used to do is, one is, okay, we don't have this, and here is the alternative, or we don't have this, and this is the quarter we are going to have this in place. Like we're going to put some controls in place. And enterprises, while they are, it's they are okay with working with startups who have that plan, and they are ready to, if they see it in like the next quarter or quarter after that, they are very welcoming to work. And being a startup, we were able to move fast, and just we don't have to wait for a year to build that. Some of them happened in the same quarter, next quarter. So that's how we started, and that worked for us. And fortunately, like it was tough, but the first customer we got was a big bank, and so we had to do everything. And after that, life was easier. So the first one, certainly getting into banks, it made it very tricky.
Got it. Actually, that's very interesting. I think one of the interesting things I heard from what you were saying is that it's it's okay if you don't have all those practices in place already, so long as you can show a path to the fact that you're serious about it and you plan to actually have them in place, and you show the roadmap to the fact that, hey, we are going to do this by so and so time. So you are demonstrating that this is something that's not just an afterthought for you, and you want to do it anyway. And if you can show that in the path, that's actually a good sign for most enterprises. Did I understand that right?
Yes. And one new skill I had to pick up is writing skill. You need to have documentation. Just go ahead and create your own trust website, or you can have your own sort of like question and answers, or a set of different documents you want to provide. It's like trust increases when you have all of these in place and you give them before they ask. So you could say,
Right.
here is a page where you could talk about our security program, and everything is available here. So those kind of things certainly went a long way in our early relationships.
Got it. Hari, thanks a lot for sharing your experiences. This is most of what I wanted to ask. This has been incredibly insightful. Thanks for sharing that. Arti, back to you.
Yeah, thank you. Thanks for having me here.
Yeah.
Hey, that was really great, Hari and Girish. We have a couple of questions. The first one, so you guys brought up an interesting point about security is all about setting up practices, but how do you make sure you continuously enforce it, especially in a growing organization?
Hari, you want to take that?
Yeah, one is in our case, there is my Monday morning starts with 3 or 4 dashboards. One is, like I said, Detectify, Security Scorecard, and Sprinto, and we want to see like and then AWS consoles where we go and check certain things. So you want to see like where you are trending towards, and if something goes wrong in the week, you don't have to immediately jump on and fix it unless it's super critical. But general, you would see the trend lines from these softwares. It's almost like you can think of it as flying a plane. You need those dashboards to look into, and you can't just look outside and fly by just by vision. So setting those right, like I said, the right tools are your dashboards with which you can control what everyone is doing. And the second one is talking about security in general with the company, like making it part of your culture, making it, like we say, secure, how enforcing, not really enforcing, but encouraging that conversation in multiple places, and making others talk about security, like security tech talks is common in Hackerrank. So those things made it like, okay, security is important and we should do this and not do this. Girish, you want to add in?
No, I think you covered the most important point that I had in mind. Like, you make what you measure. So unless you have something to actually tell you whether the things that you plan to have are running as expected, it becomes hard to sort of maintain discipline around it. So that's been my lesson as well, having seen this through a few companies, that in some way it's useful to invest in some tools that actually help you track whether you're on path or you're not. And tools in general are better than doing this via people. So that's the only point, but you covered that already.
I think that's like a follow-up question is there, where do you have any tools or best practice recommendations for CTOs when they're building enterprise first products? I think you named it.
When yeah, I at least the tools I use, as one is Sprinto. I use Detectify, and we use Security Scorecard. These are the three tools we use. It automatically gives us some stuff. We also, we go in and we have filled in the CAIQ, VSAQ, and other standard security questionnaires. And these days, even before customers send us the questionnaires, we send them, here is our answer sheets, like you check this and see if it works for you folks. Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. And in general, having a clean, you would also want to have you would have an HRMS tool, the onboarding and offboarding processes, where you set up the right onboarding and offboarding. That is one other tool you would work in, and with this I think you can do wonders for quite some time.
Okay. Thank you for that. Bhavna, I hope that answers your question. If you have any follow-ups, or if anyone else wants to know more about it, please share. I think with that we're done with session one. Thank you so much, Girish and Harish, for taking the time for this. Guys, I have also linked their emails on the chat in case you want to talk more about this with them, or if you want to understand how Sprinto and Hackerrank can help your company. Please reach out to them. I'm sure they'll be happy to help out. Yeah, so we will have session 2 with Cobalt very shortly. I think they're backstage, so stay tuned. We'll be right back.
Thank you.